Shall we carve a crocket? Oh, go on then. Right, one of the things that I get asked for the most on this channel is if I can upload a video of me carving something in real time, and with the best will in the world, guys. I mean, if I was to film this crocket, which I'll put a video up of what a crocket is here because this is what a crocket is. If I was to film myself carving this crocket in real time, that video would be about 38 hours long, and with the best will in the world, I don't think anyone wants to sit through a 38-hour long video of me carving. So while I was carving this crocket, I time-lapsed it. There's a couple of real-time clips. It's mostly time-lapse. So I've strung all of that together into about a 15-minute long video, which I think is much more palatable. So if you want to sit through a video of a crocket being born, that's what this video is. And because it's just a time-lapse video, rather than having 15 minutes of just silence, I've done a little voiceover. I get a lot of questions on here, so I thought I would do a voiceover over this video, explaining the process, explaining some things about carving versus masonry, answering a few questions that I get asked on this channel. So if you want to listen to 15 minutes of me in my glorious Grimsby accent going on about carving and crockets and masonry and all kinds of things, then that's what this video is. But also, if you just want to watch a crocket being born, then mute this video. Okay, let's carve a crocket. Right, you lot, you join us today from the Mason's Workshop here at Lincoln Cathedral with this lovely block of Dunstan stone. This is a Lincolnshire limestone. It's an oolitic limestone, and this is what Lincoln Cathedral is predominantly built out of. So this week I'm going to be carving a decorative crocket. So this particular crocket is actually just a practice piece. We have lots of crockets to carve for a couple of pinnacle replacements on the chapter house, and none of us have actually carved this particular crocket before. So we're all doing a practice piece just to get our eyes in before we start carving the real ones that are going to go on the building. So we're very lucky that we're given the time to do this. Now, I do get asked quite a lot what type of stone we use, so we are using limestone. To be honest, I could probably make an entire video all about the different stones and the stone that we use and stone sourcing and all that, because Lincoln uniquely had its own quarry. So the cathedral had its own quarry until relatively recently. The stone that was used to build the cathedral was quarried out. We have since found a new stone source from a different quarry, but we also use a type of French limestone called Laveau. My French is not that great. We're very lucky to have a cathedral geologist who does lots of tests and stone sourcing for us, so I may try and get him for an interview to talk about the cathedral geology at some point. It's a relatively hard limestone, so you may have seen some footage of me cutting limestone with a handsaw before. That would be the French limestone. The Lincoln limestone is way too hard to cut with a handsaw. We use tungsten chisels, although I am using a few steel fire sharp chisels in this video as well, just because my smaller carving chisels are not tungsten. Something I also get asked a lot is why we don't wear full head respirators like the air-fed dust masks. So we don't use electric tools in our workshop. You might have noticed we're not using grinders. Some of us use air guns or air hammers for roughing out. I sometimes use it, although I chose not to on this stone, just because this was a practice piece. I just wanted to get my eye in with hand tools. But because we're not using things like grinders, we're not generating huge amounts of invisible dust. We do have an amazing extraction system, so you might see them like above our bankers if I do like a wide shot. So we've got extractors, and also luckily, because this is limestone and it's a Lincoln limestone, it is actually less than 2% silica, which actually renders it relatively inert in terms of silica levels. If we were working sandstone, which is just pure silica, then yes, we would need to wear our full air-fed masks. We do all have these air-fed masks that we use on site because we can use grinders on site. At some point, I might make a video all about the different types of PPE we use and the different applications for those PPE, because we all have these huge plastic boxes full of different types of PPE for different situations. Anyway, back to the crocket. So you'll see I'm using quite a small clawed chisel. So we use these claw chisels to rough out and to get the basic shape. The flatter chisels can be more for finishing. But essentially, I'm just drawing it on with pencil and then working off that pencil line. So there's a constant cycle of sketching it on, working that line off, sketching the line back on, working the line off, and you're marking out your high points. So you'll see here where I've drawn these 3 circles. These are the high points of this leaf. So I'm working around those high points and essentially pushing the stone back. You're always feeling like you're pushing the stone away from the high points, pushing it down till you reach the next high point, and then you're pushing it away from that. There are people who use things called pointing machines if they're trying to replicate something figurative that is like a real identical replica. The beauty with our crockets is, while they do have to be the same type of crocket in the same type of style, you can certainly tell the hand of the mason. So I could identify my colleagues' crockets. If you line them all up, I'd be able to say, that's Craig's crocket, that's Nick's crocket, that's Cam's crocket. So you kind of can still see the style of the mason, even though they are all the same size and shape and the same type and style of crocket. I should probably add that we weren't just going in blind and just having a go at doing a crocket, but we'd never carved before. We did have an excellent carver on hand, the excellent Michael Cooper, who is currently in the workshop doing some carving, also for the chapter house. He was giving us some excellent tutoring. So a lot of people ask me where I get my chisels from. So quite a lot of my masonry chisels are from JP Chisels, who sadly went out of business a few years ago. And when my JP chisels finally die, which they will because you use them and sharpen them, there's a constant cycle of using and sharpening, and eventually I will sharpen the tungsten out of them and they will become useless, and I will be completely heartbroken when I've used my last JP chisel. But I also buy a lot of my masonry chisels from Stephen Travis at Alor, that's Alorr, who has been a chisel maker. His dad was making chisels back in the 60s. He took over his dad's business. It's a really cool historic workshop. I'm probably going to go and interview him and film him making masonry chisels at some point. They are fantastic chisels. In terms of carving chisels, though, I get a lot of mine from Italy, a fantastic Italian brand called Renzo, who make great carving chisels. A couple of years ago, I needed some new chisels, and I ended up actually just driving to Carrara to pick up some chisels, because turns out, guys, you can just drive to Italy, and it was lovely. Right, just to come back to PPE, I know people are going to ask me why I'm wearing ear defenders in a workshop where we are just tippy-tapping. We are not tippy-tapping the stone so loud that I require ear defenders. It's just that these ones have Bluetooth and I can listen to my audiobooks, because frankly, if you're going to stare at a piece of rock for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, you're going to need audiobooks and podcasts, and I'm currently rattling through everything that Brandon Sanderson has ever written, which is wonderful. Anyway, back to the carving. We can start to see it taking shape now. This is actually an undulating leaf, so it's not really supposed to have a single straight line on it. All these lines are supposed to be S-curves, so every single leaf and branch and vein is supposed to be a sort of elongated S. Oh, and this is the point at which my phone fell over and I didn't notice for a full 20 minutes because I am so professional. So carving like this is a little bit unusual for someone like me who trained purely as a banker mason. So banker masonry is essentially the making of the components, the building blocks that make up the cathedral. So things like string courses and voussoirs and weatherings and copings and all that kind of stuff, the sort of masonry architectural elements that make up the building. And these are all very precise. We work from line to line with a less than 2mm tolerance, sort of millimetre tolerances. Everything is flat. Even the curved surfaces are technically just lots of flat surfaces. So you're constantly checking with a straight edge to make sure it's very precise. So having to carve something a little bit more decorative like this is very unusual for me. So carving something more free-form and free-flowing, where I'm not constantly checking between two lines, is very different to my usual day-to-day masonry. So you have to get out of your stonemason head and into your carving head. So this particular crocket took me 5 full days, Monday to Friday, which I think is pretty slow. But this was the first time I'd ever carved this crocket. So there was a lot of thinking and a lot of looking and a lot of sketching and a lot of kind of figuring out which move to make next, what the process would be, because you have to break it down into kind of step-by-step processes in your head, a little bit like chess. You got to think 2 or 3 moves ahead each time. The next crocket that I carved after this one, which I think I've also filmed, ended up taking me 3.5 days, which I thought was quite good progress. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, as I previously mentioned, I'm using a lot of these little claw chisels, but I'm also using a lot of bull noses, these rounder chisels you can see here. They look like little spoons. Bull noses are my absolute favourite. So I am eventually, not to sound like a broken record, I am eventually going to make a video all about chisels and the types of chisels that I use and where I get them from and what they are for. So watch this space. Now, another question I get asked quite a lot is, am I a freelance, self-employed mason, or am I employed by the cathedral? So I'm incredibly lucky to be employed by the corporate body of Lincoln Cathedral and work directly for the works department here at Lincoln. Now, in the UK, of the 42 Anglican cathedrals, I think about 13 have their own in-house works department team of varying sizes. I know some cathedrals have a couple of people, some cathedrals have up to 40 works department members, and that can include glazers, joiners, woodworkers, plumbers, electricians, facilities teams, grounds workers. So some cathedrals have quite big departments, some have relatively smaller departments. We're quite lucky here at Lincoln. I think we have about 20 people, including the joiners, the lead workers, the conservators, the glazers, and of course the masons. Now, in terms of funding for the works, something that I get asked about quite a lot, and something that I think a lot of people don't realise, is that the cathedrals, the Anglican cathedrals in England, don't receive any funding or any tax breaks directly from the government, and neither do we receive any money from the Church of England itself for the upkeep of the building. So when you're visiting a British cathedral, an English cathedral, and you're paying an admission fee or giving a donation or paying for a ticket to go on a tour or anything like that, that money is what is going towards the upkeep of the building and keeping the building standing. So each cathedral is an independent charity in its own right and relies solely on charitable donations in order to do the essential works that need to be done to keep these buildings going. Because unfortunately here at Lincoln, I believe we are the only cathedral in the country to be on the at-risk register in its entirety. So the entire building is unfortunately at risk, which is why it's so important that we're doing these works to keep it standing and keeping it available for people to come and visit for many, many years to come. So just before I get off my soapbox about this, I would encourage everyone to visit their local built heritage, their cathedrals, their castles, their stately homes. A lot of these are run as charities and run by charities, and they really do rely on their admission fees and their donations in order to keep them open for the public to enjoy, because it's such an important part of our cultural identity. Our built heritage is so important. Okay, rant over, back to the crocket. So at this point, the crocket is really starting to look like what it's supposed to look like. And this is when it just gets a lot more enjoyable, I think. When you're faced with a blank stone, sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating. And I do think it does tend to look horrendously messy right up to the point when it doesn't. And at this point, I'm just doing a little bit of final fettling, a little bit of like tippy-tapping to just finesse it and finagle it a little bit to make it look a bit neater, and just going over each individual leaf to make sure each one is perfect. And there we have it, one finished crocket. Like I said, this is the practice piece just to make sure we were all on the same page and all carving the same crockets. And now that we have all done our practice crockets, we will be carving actual real crockets for the building that will be going on the cathedral later this year. And I will keep this crocket on my banker so that when I'm carving the next one, I can use this as a point of reference and keep checking back with it to make sure I'm doing it right. Right. That was it. I hope that was somewhat enjoyable and not totally boring. Well done for making it to the end of this video, listening to me going on for 15 minutes. Once again, I'm really sorry that this is in portrait. A lot of the footage that I filmed of this, I filmed before I started doing YouTube. So I do the Instagram thing. So if you want to see more like daily updates, then pop over to my Instagram, the Ginger Mason on Instagram, and I do a lot of stories and a lot of more like daily stuff on my stories there. So a lot of my footage is in portrait because I filmed a lot of this before I started doing YouTube. Going forward, I will try and make sure that all my new videos are in landscape. I know that it's quite annoying, the format change. What's the other thing? Oh yeah, if you want to like and subscribe, that would be really cool. I would love that. But you don't have to, that's cool too. Right, it's Monday morning, let's go to work.